You want to go home to your family tonight, or do you want to sit in a county jail while I tear this car apart?" Deputy Eric Turner leaned heavily into the driver's side window, the smell of stale coffee, cheap cologne, and absolute unquestioned authority rolling off him in waves. The relentless Texas heat radiated from the asphalt, but it was nothing compared to the chill of the officer's threat. He tapped his heavy metal flashlight against the glass in a slow, rhythmic beat, his eyes dead and cold behind mirrored aviators. "I know there's drug money in here. Hand it over, and maybe I forget I saw you." Monique Brown gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white as her heart hammered violently against her ribs. He thought she was just another frightened, helpless victim trapped on a lonely stretch of highway. He had absolutely no idea he had just pulled over the worst mistake of his entire life. For 7 long years, Deputy Eric Turner of the fictionalized but all too real South Texas jurisdictions considered State Highway 288 his personal, unregulated ATM. Stretching down from the bustling, concrete heart of Houston into the quiet, sun-baked expanses of Brazoria County, the highway was a flat, unforgiving ribbon of asphalt. It was a vital artery for daily commuters, weary travelers, and, in Turner's calculating mind, an endless parade of prey. To the passing eye, Turner was the absolute picture of law enforcement perfection. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and physically imposing, with a perfectly pressed uniform, a crisp campaign hat pulled low, and a polished silver badge that glinted menacingly under the relentless Texas sun. He projected safety and order. But behind the mirrored sunglasses was a man deeply and irredeemably corrupted by the very power he was sworn to wield responsibly. He wasn't a public servant. He was an apex predator with a siren. Turner had perfected a terrifyingly simple, practically foolproof modus operandi. He targeted the vulnerable, out-of-state plates passing through unfamiliar territory, older, battered vehicles driven by people who looked like they didn't have the financial resources or legal knowledge to fight back in a court of law. Single mothers, out-of-town laborers, and exhausted road trippers were his favorite marks. He would initiate a traffic stop for a phantom violation, a failure to signal exactly 100 feet before a lane change, tires allegedly touching the solid white line for a fraction of a second, or a dealership license plate frame, obscuring the state name by half an inch. Once the driver was pulled over on the dusty gravel shoulder, completely isolated and psychologically intimidated by the blinding flashes of red and blue lights, Turner would begin his sadistic game. He used a twisted, weaponized interpretation of civil asset forfeiture laws. This is a real-world legal loophole that allows law enforcement to seize cash and property they simply suspect is tied to criminal activity, often without ever officially charging the driver with a single crime. Turner would aggressively separate the driver from the vehicle, forcing them to stand in the brutal heat. He would claim he smelled the faint odor of marijuana, a completely unprovable assertion that immediately gave him probable cause to bypass the Fourth Amendment and conduct an aggressive, illegal search. He would tear through luggage, rip up floor mats, and empty glove boxes. When he found cash, whether it was a few $100s intended for groceries or thousands saved up for a used car purchase, he would present his chilling ultimatum: surrender the money as suspected illicit funds and walk away with a mere verbal warning, or face immediate arrest. Having their vehicle impounded to an expensive lot and fighting a fabricated, life-destroying felony drug charge in a justice system famously stacked against them. Fear is an incredibly powerful motivator. Faced with the immediate loss of their freedom and the terror of a jail cell, for years, the drivers consistently chose to lose their money rather than their lives. Turner would pocket the cash, never filing a single incident report or piece of official paperwork, and drive off into the night, leaving his victims stranded and traumatized. He amassed tens of thousands of untraceable dollars this way, funding a lavish lifestyle entirely hidden behind the modest, publicly funded salary of a county deputy. He bought a luxury 2-4-foot center console boat he cynically named Probable Cause, took extravagant, undocumented trips to Cabo San Lucas, and wore a heavy gold Rolex carefully hidden under the long sleeve of his uniform shirt. He believed he was utterly invincible, protected by the thin blue line, his badge, and the sheer, paralyzing terror of his victims. He thought he had the entire game rigged in his favor. But arrogance breeds catastrophic complacency, and Turner was about to learn that karma has a terrifying, inescapable way of balancing the scales. See, Monique Brown was not a drug runner. She wasn't an easily intimidated tourist, and she certainly wasn't an easy mark for a shakedown. Monique was a 34-year-old senior forensic accountant and a covert compliance auditor for the FBI's Houston field office, specifically attached to the elite Public Corruption Task Force. Her entire professional career was built on finding the invisible, convoluted threads of dirty money tracking wire transfers through shell companies and offshore accounts and pulling them until the whole corrupt tapestry unraveled into a federal indictment. She was brilliant, relentlessly analytical, and possessed a glacial calm under extreme pressure that routinely unsettled even her most seasoned FBI field supervisors. On a sweltering Tuesday afternoon in mid-August, the air thick with humidity, Monique was driving her sister's slightly battered 2015 Honda Accord back from Corpus Christi. She was dressed entirely down in loose gym clothes, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, looking completely unassuming and unremarkable. The car lacked the sleek tint and polished rims of a high roller. It was practically invisible, exactly the way she liked to travel. In the trunk of the car, secured in a locked, heavy-duty fireproof briefcase, was $18,500 in bundled cash. But this wasn't illicit street money. It was the payout from a completely legal, meticulously documented estate sale of her late grandmother's rural property. The cash had been directly withdrawn from a legitimate, federally insured bank that very morning. And crucially, because Monique was ever the meticulous, obsessive accountant, she had kept the crisp, white bank withdrawal slips. Those slips didn't just state the total amount. They listed the specific, sequential serial numbers of every single $100 bill inside that briefcase. It was the ultimate kryptonite to Turner's fabricated probable cause. As she cruised up Highway 288, the intense heat shimmering off the asphalt like a watery mirage, she was casually listening to an audiobook, her mind focused on returning to her apartment in Houston. She was driving perfectly within the speed limit, her hands resting comfortably at 10 and 2. But far behind her, in the dusty median dividing the highway, a Brazoria County Sheriff's cruiser slipped aggressively into the fast lane, accelerating to close the gap. Deputy Eric Turner had been sitting in his air-conditioned cruiser for an hour, bored, restless, and actively looking for his next untraceable payday. As the older Honda passed, he saw the lone female driver and the slightly faded, chipped paint job. To his highly honed predatory instincts, she looked isolated and vulnerable. He ran the plates through his onboard computer. They came back clean, registered to an address in a lower-income, working-class neighborhood in South Houston, her sister's actual address. It was the absolute perfect profile for a smooth, unproblematic shakedown. Turner flicked on his overhead light bar. The blinding red and blue strobes shattered the lazy afternoon calm, reflecting off the Honda's rearview mirror. Monique let out a slow sigh, checked her speedometer one last time to confirm she was doing exactly 65 inches a 70 zone, and carefully engaged her blinker, pulling over onto the loose gravel of the dusty shoulder. She had absolutely no idea she was about to enter the crosshairs of a serial extortionist, but she was more than ready for whatever came next. The heavy gravel crunched loudly under Turner's thick black tactical boots as he slowly approached the passenger side of the Honda. It was a deliberate, practiced tactic, designed to force the driver to strain their neck and look up at him, instantly establishing a physical hierarchy of dominance. He tapped the glass sharply with his flashlight. Monique rolled down the window, her expression remaining perfectly neutral and unbothered. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Turner barked sharply, bypassing any standard professional greeting or courtesy. "Officer, could you please tell me why I was pulled over?" Monique asked, her voice steady, polite, and completely devoid of the panic he was so used to hearing. "You swerved heavily over the solid yellow line back there." Turner lied effortlessly, his mirrored eyes already scanning the interior of the car, looking for anything he could leverage. "Where exactly are you coming from?" "Corpus Christi. I'm heading home to Houston." Turner snatched her documents from her hand, his eyes darting to the name on the license. Monique Brown. He ran the name through his mental database. He didn't recognize it. No obvious wealth, no connected family name. Good. Wait right here, he commanded. He stalked back to his cruiser, ostensibly to run her information through dispatch, but the delay was a calculated psychological weapon. He sat there for 10 agonizing minutes, letting the isolation, the roaring traffic flying past inches away, and the strobing emergency lights work on her nerves. When he finally returned to her window, his demeanor had shifted from sternly authoritative to openly, aggressively hostile. "Step out of the vehicle right now, Miss Brown," he commanded, his right hand resting casually but purposefully on the black grip of his holstered service weapon. "Is there a problem, deputy?" she asked, her hands remaining visible on the steering wheel, not moving to unbuckle her belt just yet. I said, "Step out of the car." I smell the distinct odor of raw marijuana emanating from the cabin of this vehicle, which gives me immediate probable cause to conduct a full search of the premises. Monique knew exactly what was happening. Her years of FBI field training and legal education immediately kicked in, suppressing any natural human fight or flight response. She knew perfectly well that arguing constitutional law on the side of a blazing highway with an armed, aggressive, and clearly corrupt officer was a losing battle that could get her killed. The side of the road is never a courtroom. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out into the oppressive, suffocating heat. "Stand all the way back there by my push bumper," Turner ordered, pointing to the front of his police SUV. As she walked to the front of his cruiser, keeping her hands visible, she subtly tapped the side of her Apple Watch with her index finger. She had a custom security shortcut programmed for fieldwork. It instantly bypassed the screen lock, began recording high-definition audio, and simultaneously broadcasted a live, encrypted feed to her secure FBI cloud server. It was a standard precaution she used when auditing hostile environments, and it was currently capturing every breath Turner took. Turner ruthlessly tore through her sister's car. Monique watched as he pulled out the rubber floor mats and tossed them into the dirt, dumped the entire contents of her purse onto the passenger seat, and finally popped the trunk. She listened to the tearing of Velcro, the clatter of her spare tire being shoved aside, and the brutal disregard for her personal space. Finally, he found the locked, fireproof briefcase tucked behind the wheel well. "What's in here?" he demanded, hauling it out and slamming it onto the trunk lid. "Personal documents and private family funds," Monique replied calmly, her voice projecting clearly over the highway noise to ensure the watch recorded it. "I explicitly do not consent to a search of that locked container." Turner actually scoffed, a short, ugly sound of amusement. He grabbed a heavy iron crowbar from the back of his cruiser, wedged it under the cheap brass clasp of the briefcase, and popped it open with a violent wrench. When he saw the neat, tight stacks of crisp $100 bills, his breathing actually hitched. His eyes lit up with a greedy, unchecked triumph. This was, without a doubt, the biggest single score of his entire corrupt career. He walked back over to where Monique was standing, casually holding 3 thick bundles of her cash in his large hands. 18 grand, in a beat-up, 10-year-old Honda. "You seriously expect me to believe this isn't cartel drug money? It is from an estate sale. I have the signed legal paperwork and bank receipts in the glove box," she stated. Her heart was beating fast now, a steady drum rhythm of adrenaline, but her voice remained icy, precise, and perfectly controlled. This was the moment of truth, the pivot point of his entire operation. "Listen to me very, very carefully." Turner leaned in close, his breath hot and smelling of old tobacco, delivering the exact script that had broken dozens of terrified drivers before her. "You want to go home to your family tonight, or do you want to sit in a filthy county jail while I call a K-9 unit and tear this entire car apart down to the chassis? I know there's drug money in here. Hand it over. Sign this property waiver relinquishing your rights to it, and maybe I forget I ever saw you today. If you fight me, I arrest you right now for felony money laundering. I impound the car, and I make sure CPS comes for whoever is waiting for you at home." Most people would break down and cry. Most people would hyperventilate with panic. Most people, terrified of losing their children or their freedom, would shakily sign away the money just to escape the immediate, suffocating nightmare of his authority. Monique Brown did none of those things. She looked Deputy Eric Turner dead in the eye, her gaze unflinching. She didn't shed a tear. She didn't beg for mercy. She simply stood there and calculated her tactical advantages. She quickly noted that the body camera mounted on his chest was suspiciously dark. The small green LED light, indicating it was actively recording, was turned off. She memorized the exact spelling of his nameplate, his specific badge number, and the bright white unit number decaled on the side of his cruiser. "Okay," Monique said softly, letting her shoulders slump to perfectly portray the body language of a thoroughly defeated, terrified woman. "Take it. Just, please let me go." Turner grinned, a nasty, victorious smirk that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Smart girl. You're making the right choice." He carelessly shoved the massive stacks of bills directly into the deep pockets of his tactical vest. He handed her back her driver's license without another word, completely failing to provide a single piece of official seizure paperwork, a property receipt, or a citation. "Get out of here. And if I ever see you driving on my highway again, you won't be—" Monique got back into her ransacked, chaotic car, carefully stepping over her discarded floor mats. Her hands were shaking visibly now, but not from residual fear. They shook from pure, unadulterated, professional adrenaline. She put the car in gear and watched intensely in her rearview mirror as Turner did an aggressive, illegal U-turn over the grassy median, tires kicking up dust as he sped away, heading south toward his jurisdiction. She pulled the Honda back onto the highway, ensuring her Apple Watch was still recording the aftermath. She didn't drive home to shower. She didn't call her sister to complain. She drove directly, without stopping, to the massive glass and steel FBI Houston field office located in the Heights. She didn't speed, and she didn't weave. She drove with the cold precision of a predator locking onto a fresh blood trail. When Monique badged her way into the secure bullpen of the Public Corruption Unit, her supervisor, Special Agent in Charge David Vance, immediately stopped what he was doing. He saw the cold fury radiating from her posture. "What happened?" he asked, standing up from his desk. "I just got robbed under color of law on State Highway 288, Monique said flatly, dropping the violently broken briefcase with a heavy thud right in the center of his desk. Brazoria County Deputy Eric Turner, and he just took $18,000 of sequential, perfectly traceable United States currency that I currently hold the federally stamped withdrawal receipts for." Vance's eyes widened in disbelief. Corrupt cops who specialized in highway extortion were notoriously difficult to catch because it was almost always their official word against a frightened citizen with a minor criminal record. But Turner hadn't robbed a vulnerable citizen. He had just robbed a senior federal forensic accountant who had pristine, cloud-backed audio of the entire illegal encounter. Vance was a 20-year veteran of the Bureau who had seen every flavor of municipal graft, yet even he was stunned by the sheer, brazen stupidity of it. "He's done. I'll have a warrant drafted in an hour," Vance whispered, already reaching for his desk phone. "No," Monique replied sharply, her eyes narrowing with strategic intent. "Not yet. A guy this comfortable with extortion has been doing this for years. If we bust him now, he claims it was a one-time lapse in judgment and takes a plea deal for a slap on the wrist. We need to know exactly how deep this rot goes. We need to catch him in the act so cleanly, with so much irrefutable evidence, that he can't plea bargain his way out of a federal penitentiary." The FBI didn't move immediately. Patience was their greatest weapon. They spent 3 agonizingly quiet weeks, meticulously building a fortress of a legal case. They partnered silently with the Texas Rangers Public Corruption Unit, a legendary, fiercely independent state agency that absolutely did not tolerate dirty badges tarnishing the state's reputation. Working behind the scenes, they quietly subpoenaed Turner's personal and business bank records, uncovering a glaring, undeniable pattern of massive, unexplained cash deposits that coincided perfectly with the end of his highway patrol shifts. They covertly pinged his cruiser's GPS history, mapping out a long history of undocumented, off-the-books traffic stops clustered on the most isolated, camera-free stretches of Highway 288. They built a comprehensive psychological profile of a man completely drunk on his own impunity. But to nail his coffin shut permanently, they needed a sting operation. They needed Turner to arrogantly bite the hook one last time on camera. The elaborate trap was finally set on a sweltering, humid Friday evening right at the start of rush hour. The bait was a highly decorated undercover Texas Ranger named Mateo Silva. Silva was driving a recently seized, nondescript 2008 Chevy Tahoe outfitted with out-of-state Louisiana license plates to perfectly match Turner's preferred target profile. Sitting innocuously in the Tahoe's center console was a faded gym bag containing exactly $25,000 in banded cash. This gym bag was an absolute masterpiece of forensic bait. Every single $100 bill had been individually photographed, its unique serial number logged into a federal database, and thoroughly dusted with an invisible, highly potent UV reactive tracking powder that transferred instantly upon touch. Furthermore, the Tahoe was internally rigged with 4 hidden, wide-angle 4K cameras and redundant high-fidelity microphones wired directly to the vehicle's battery. 3 miles ahead and 3 miles behind the Tahoe, a heavily armed convoy of unmarked FBI and Texas Ranger pursuit vehicles paced Silva, blending perfectly into the civilian traffic. High above the cloud line, a Texas Department of Public Safety helicopter circled lazily, using military-grade, high-altitude thermal optics to monitor the entire highway corridor without making a sound. Monique Brown sat quietly in the darkened, air-conditioned mobile command center parked miles away, staring intently at a glowing monitor that displayed the live, crystal-clear feed from Ranger Silva's dashboard. The air in the command center was thick with stale coffee and hyper-focused tension. "Come on, Turner," she whispered to the screen, her eyes tracking the GPS dots. "Take the bait. Do what you do best." At exactly 6:45 p.m., the tactical radio crackled to life. "Target acquired," the aerial surveillance team reported in a clipped, professional tone. "Unit 44 is pulling aggressively out of the median at mile marker 12. He's tailing the bait vehicle." On the monitor in front of Monique, the familiar, terrifying red and blue strobe lights flared aggressively into existence in the Tahoe's rearview mirror. Ranger Silva smoothly engaged his turn signal and pulled over onto the shoulder. Turner confidently approached the vehicle, his hand resting on his gun belt. The sheer arrogance was palpable even through the digital screen. He used the exact same, tired script. He loudly claimed Silva had drifted dangerously over the white line. He leaned in and claimed he immediately smelled the overwhelming odor of unburnt marijuana. He ordered Ranger Silva out of the car, patted him down roughly, and began his illegal, tearing search of the interior. When Turner popped the center console and found the heavy gym bag, the hidden wide-angle camera captured his eyes widening with unmasked greed. He carried the bag to the back tailgate of the Tahoe, unzipping it to reveal the banded stacks. "Looks like you're in a whole lot of federal trouble, son." Turner's voice echoed crisply through the hidden microphones, transmitting directly to the FBI command center. "But I'm a reasonable man. You leave this suspected drug money right here with me. You get back in your car, and you drive your ass straight back to Louisiana without looking back. We have a deal? Just take it, man. Please, I can't go to jail. Don't arrest me," Ranger Silva pleaded, his voice cracking perfectly as he played his role of the terrified civilian to the hilt. Turner smiled, a genuine look of predatory satisfaction. He zipped up the bag tightly. "Have a safe drive back home." Turner casually walked back to his Brazoria County cruiser, tossed the heavy bag of powdered money into his passenger seat, and climbed heavily behind the wheel. He reached up to shift the cruiser into drive, utterly oblivious to the storm about to break over his head. He didn't even have time to touch the gear shift. "Execute, execute, execute," Sack Vance commanded sharply into the main tactical radio channel. It happened in a matter of seconds, an overwhelming display of coordinated force. The seemingly empty, quiet stretch of highway violently exploded with action. 3 heavy, unmarked black SUVs materialized out of the dusk traffic at terrifying speeds, swerving violently to completely box in Turner's cruiser, pinning him tight against the guardrail from the front, back, and driver's side. Simultaneously, the deafening roar of the DPS helicopter shattered the air as it dropped dramatically from the sky, hovering just above the asphalt and pinning Turner's windshield in the blinding, daylight-bright beam of a massive tactical spotlight. Before Turner's brain could even register the threat, Before his hand could even twitch toward his radio or his weapon, a dozen heavily armed FBI field agents and Texas Rangers swarmed his trapped vehicle from every blind spot. FBI, turn the vehicle off. Keep your hands right where we can see them. Do not move. Turner froze entirely, his mind completely unable to process the waking nightmare unfolding around him. The untouchable hunter had instantly become the outgunned prey. When Turner failed to unlock the door out of sheer shock, a massive Texas Ranger didn't hesitate. He swung a steel baton, shattering the passenger side safety glass with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. The Ranger reached through the broken glass, unlocked the doors, and the team physically dragged Deputy Eric Turner out of the cabin, throwing him face first onto the rough, burning asphalt of Highway 288. As they aggressively ratcheted the steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists, the lead investigative ranger grabbed Turner's trembling hands and clicked on a specialized UV flashlight. Under the intense purple beam, Turner's palms and fingers lit up like a neon sign, glowing a brilliant, radioactive green from the invisible tracking powder coating the bait money. It screamed his absolute guilt into the Texas night. A black SUV door opened a few feet away, and Monique Brown stepped out into the flashing lights. She walked slowly up to where Turner was currently kneeling on the hot ground, his face pale and slick with panicked sweat, his entire career, pension, and life completely destroyed in a matter of 60 terrifying seconds. Turner looked up, squinting painfully against the glaring helicopter spotlight. As his eyes adjusted, recognition slowly, horrifyingly dawned on his face. It was the quiet, unassuming woman from the beat-up Honda 3 weeks ago, the one he was so certain he had broken and intimidated. Monique looked down at the disgraced deputy, her expression colder than the ice in his veins. "I told you it was a mistake to search my car," she said softly, ensuring he heard every word over the chopping helicopter blades. "You have the right to remain silent, Deputy Turner. Considering everything we just recorded, I highly suggest you finally use it." The legal and public fallout was immediate, absolute, and catastrophic. When the FBI executed a no-knock raid on Turner's sprawling suburban home later that night, they discovered a staggering hoard of evidence. They found over $150,000 in loose cash hidden inside a hollowed-out floor safe in his garage. Even more damning, they found a physical ledger, a plain, black-marbled composition notebook that stood as a monument to his incredible arrogance, where he had actually stupidly kept a detailed track of dates, vehicle descriptions, and amounts from his highway tax shakedowns over the years. Faced with the audio of his extortion attempts, the high-definition video of the sting, the glowing UV powder on his hands, and his own handwritten ledger, the evidence was so hopelessly overwhelming that Turner's high-priced defense attorney strongly advised him not to even attempt fighting it in a trial. His reputation was shredded in the court of public opinion before he even saw a judge. The story dominated the national news cycle for weeks, sending massive shockwaves of outrage and reform through the entire Texas law enforcement community. The Brazoria County Sheriff's Office faced an immediate, crippling Department of Justice civil rights investigation. This federal scrutiny led directly to the forced resignation of several top-ranking officials who had turned a blind eye to Turner's stats, and the agonizing process of overturning dozens of questionable, life-ruining felony convictions. Turner had been the primary arresting officer on. Eric Turner was formally charged with multiple severe federal counts, including deprivation of rights under color of law, armed extortion, and wire fraud. The federal judge overseeing the case, visibly disgusted by Turner's systematic, cowardly abuse of public trust and power, showed absolutely zero mercy during sentencing. Turner was sentenced to a brutal 18 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. But the true, biting edge of his karma wasn't just the length of the sentence, it was the specific location. Due to severe system overcrowding and his specific security risk designations, Turner was eventually transferred to the United States Penitentiary in Beaumont, Texas, a notorious, maximum security facility widely known for its violent, unforgiving environment. Inside those concrete walls, a disgraced former cop is the absolute lowest rung on the prison food chain. The shiny silver badge that once gave him the terrifying power to extort innocent people on lonely stretches of highway now made him a constant, highly prized target for the inmates, many of whom were there because of officers just like him. Turner spent his days looking constantly over his shoulder, mostly confined to an 8 by 10 cell for 23 hours a day in strict protective custody, forced to live out the next 2 decades in exactly the kind of breathless terror he had so casually inflicted on so many vulnerable drivers. Monique Brown quietly went back to her desk at the FBI. She received a prestigious commendation from the director of the bureau for her flawless execution of the sting, but she never bothered to frame it. Instead, she kept the broken, jagged brass lock from her old briefcase sitting directly on her desk. It served as a permanent daily reminder to herself and her team that true power doesn't come from a tin badge and a service weapon. It comes from the unyielding courage to stand up in the face of systemic corruption and the ironclad knowledge that sooner or later, karma always comes to aggressively collect its debts.